The sturdy vehicle, a weathered sedan that had devoured countless miles with unwavering determination, finally shuddered to a halt. The sudden cessation of motion, accompanied by the gradual dying hum of the engine, left a silence that felt almost unnerving after hours of relentless drone. My muscles, stiff from prolonged inactivity, protested as I shifted, pressing my face closer to the cool glass of the window. Outside, the world stretched before us, an unsettlingly familiar tableau. The landscape, a monotonous expanse of sun-baked earth, punctuated by resilient, gnarled trees and sparse, wind-whipped shrubs, remained utterly unchanged, as if time and distance had conspired to keep us anchored in an eternal, desolate present. There were no new landmarks, no welcoming signs, no subtle shifts in topography that might herald our arrival. Just the same endless, unforgiving horizon. A flicker of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through my weariness. Had we truly reached our destination, or had we merely stopped in another indistinguishable stretch of this forsaken journey? Yet, a strange sense of finality settled over the interior of the car, a quiet affirmation that this was, indeed, the end of the road. We were here. Magister Illyrio, Viserys said, a wide, almost manic smile stretching his gaunt face. His mood, tonight, was alarmingly high. The color will bring out the violet in your eyes, and you shall have gold as well, and jewels of all sorts. Illyrio has promised. Tonight, you must look like a princess. A princess? Dany thought she had forgotten what that was like, if she had ever truly known. The word felt alien, a relic from a life she had never lived, a ghost story her brother told to himself. Why does he give us so much? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. What does he want from us? For a year and a half, they had lived in the Magister's sprawling house, eating his rich foods, pampered by his silent servants. Dany was 13, old enough to know that such lavish gifts seldom came without a heavy price, especially here in the cutthroat free city of Pentos. Illyrio is no fool, Viserys asserted, his hands twitching nervously, a feverish glint in his pale lilac eyes. The Magister knows that I will not forget my friends when I come into my throne. Dany said nothing. She knew Magister Illyrio Mopatis was more than a mere dealer in spices and gemstones. He traded in dragon bone and other, far less savory things. He was said to have friends in all 9 free cities, and even beyond, in distant V's Duthrak and the fabled lands beside the Jade Sea. It was also whispered that Illyrio had never had a friend he wouldn't cheerfully sell for the right price. Dany listened to the street talk, heard these unsettling truths, but she knew better than to question her brother when he was weaving his fragile web of dreams. His anger, when roused, was a terrible thing. Viserys called it waking the dragon. Her brother hung the chosen gown beside the door, a shimmering plum silk that promised to accentuate the rare violet of her eyes. Illyrio will send the slaves to bathe you, he commanded, his voice sharp. Be sure you wash off the stink of the stables. Khal Drogo has 1,000 horses tonight, but he looks for a different sort of mount. He studied her critically, his gaze piercing. You still slouch. Straighten yourself. He pushed back her shoulders with his hands, his touch surprisingly firm. Let them see that you have a woman's shape now. His fingers brushed lightly over her budding breasts, then tightened on one nipple, a cruel, possessive pinch that made her gasp. You will not fail me tonight. If you do, it will go hard for you. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? His fingers twisted again, the pinch cruelly hard through the rough fabric of her tunic. Do you? He repeated, his voice low and dangerous. No, Dany said meekly, barely able to breathe. Her brother smiled then, a flash of relief and triumph. Good. He touched her hair, almost with affection. When they write the history of my reign, sweet sister, they will say that it began tonight. When he was gone, Dany went to her window and looked out wistfully on the dark waters of the bay. The square brick towers of Pentos were black silhouettes, stark against the setting sun. She could hear the haunting singing of the red priests as they lit the night fires, and the distant shouts of ragged children playing games beyond the high walls of the estate. For a fleeting moment, she wished she could be out there with them, barefoot and breathless, dressed in tatters, with no past, no future, and no dreadful feast to attend at Khal Drogo's encampment. Somewhere beyond the sunset, across the narrow sea, lay a land of green hills and flowered plains, of great rushing rivers and ancient towers of dark stone rising amidst magnificent blue-gray mountains, where armored knights rode to battle beneath the proud banners of their lords. The Dothraki, in their own tongue, called that land Rish Anali, the land of the Undals. In the free cities, they spoke of Westeros, the Sunset Kingdoms. Her brother, however, had a simpler, more fervent name. Our land, he called it. The words were like a prayer with him, a mantra he repeated endlessly, as if by sheer repetition the gods were bound to hear. Ours by bloodright, taken from us by treachery, but ours still, ours forever. You do not steal from the dragon. Oh no, the dragon remembers. And perhaps the dragon did remember, but Daenerys could not. She had never seen this land her brother claimed was theirs. This realm beyond the narrow sea, these places he talked of, Casterly Rock and the airy Highgarden, the Vale of Arryn and the deserts of Dorne, the Isle of Faces, they were just words to her, echoes from a forgotten history. Viserys had been a boy of 8 when they fled King's Landing, scrambling to escape the advancing armies of the usurper. But Daenerys had been only a quickening in her mother's womb. Yet sometimes Dany would picture the way it had been, so often had her brother told her the stories. The desperate midnight flight to Dragonstone, moonlight shimmering on the ship's black sails, her brother Rhaegar battling the usurper in the bloody waters of the Trident and dying for the woman he loved. The brutal sack of King's Landing by the ones Viserys called the usurper's dogs, the Lords Lannister and Stark. Princess Elia Martell of Dorne pleading for mercy as Rhaegar's heir was ripped from her breast and murdered before her eyes. The polished skulls of the last dragons staring down sightlessly from the walls of the throne room, while the Kingslayer opened father's throat with a golden sword. She had been born on Dragonstone 9 moons after their flight, while a raging summer storm threatened to rip the island fortress apart. They said that storm was terrible, a maelstrom of wind and waves. The Targaryen fleet was smashed while it lay at anchor, and huge stone blocks were ripped from the parapets and sent hurtling into the wild waters of the narrow sea. Her mother had died birthing her, and for that, her brother, Viserys, had never forgiven her. She did not remember Dragonstone either. They had run again just before the usurper's brother, Stannis, set sail with his newly built fleet. By then, only Dragonstone itself, the ancient seat of their house, had remained of the 7 kingdoms that had once been theirs. It would not remain for long. The garrison had been prepared to sell them to the usurper. But one night, Ser Willem Darry and 4 loyal men had broken into the nursery and stolen them both, along with her wet nurse, setting sail under cover of darkness for the perceived safety of the Braavosi coast. She remembered Ser Willem dimly, a great gray bear of a man, half-blind, roaring and bellowing orders from his sickbed. The other servants had lived in terror of him, but he had always been kind to Dany. He called her little princess and sometimes my lady, and his hands, despite their size, were soft as old leather. He never left his bed, though, and the smell of sickness clung to him day and night, a hot, moist, sickly sweet odor that still, sometimes, haunted her memory. That was when they lived in Braavos, in the big house with the red door. Dany had her own room there, with a vibrant lemon tree outside her window. After Ser Willem had died, the servants had stolen what little money they had left, and soon after, they had been put out of the big house. Dany had cried when the red door closed behind them forever. They had wandered since then, from Braavos to Myr, from Myr to Tyrosh and on to Qohor and Volantis and Lys, never staying long in any one place. Her brother would not allow it. The usurper's hired knives were close behind them. He insisted, though Dany had never seen one. At first, the magisters and archons and merchant princes were pleased to welcome the last Targaryens to their opulent homes and grand tables. But as the years passed, and the usurper continued to sit firmly upon the Iron Throne, doors closed, and their lives grew meaner, more desperate. Years passed. They had been forced to sell their last few treasures, and now even the coin they had gotten from their mother's crown had gone. In the dark alleys and smoky wine sinks of Pintos, they called her brother the Beggar King. Dany did not want to know what they called her. "We will have it all back someday, sweet sister," he would promise her, his voice often trembling when he spoke of it. The jewels and the silks, Dragonstone and King's Landing, the Iron Throne and the Seven Kingdoms. All they have taken from us, we will have it back. Viserys lived for that day, for that illusory future. All that Daenerys wanted back was a big house with the red door, the lemon tree outside her window, the childhood she had never known. There came a soft knock on her door. "Come," Dany said, turning away from the window, pulling herself back from her reverie. Illyrio's servants entered, bowed silently, and set about their business. They were slaves, a gift from the Magister's many Dothraki friends, a cruel irony since there was supposedly no slavery in the free city of Pentos. Nonetheless, they were slaves. The old woman, small and gray as a mouse, never said a word, but the girl, Illyrio's apparent favorite, made up for it. She was a fair-haired, blue-eyed wench of 16, who chattered constantly as she worked. They filled her bath with hot water, brought up from the kitchen in steaming buckets, and scented it with fragrant oils. The girl pulled the rough cotton tunic over Dany's head and helped her into the tub. The water was scalding hot, but Daenerys did not flinch or cry out. She liked the intense heat. It made her feel clean, purified. Besides, her brother had often told her it was never too hot for a Targaryen. "Ours is the house of the dragon," he would say. "The fire is in our blood." The old woman washed her long, silver-pale hair and gently combed out the snags, all in silence. The girl scrubbed her back and her feet, chattering incessantly about how lucky Dany was. "Drogo is so rich that even his slaves wear golden collars. 100,000 men riding in his colosar, and his palace in V's Dothrak has 200 rooms and doors of solid silver. There was more like that, so much more. What a handsome man. The Khal is so tall and fierce, fearless in battle, the best rider ever to mount a horse, a demon archer." Daenerys said nothing, listening with a growing sense of dread. She had always assumed that she would wed Viserys when she came of age. For centuries, the Targaryens had married brother to sister, ever since Aegon the Conqueror had taken his sisters to bride. The line must be kept pure, Viserys had told her 1,000 times. Theirs was the king's blood, the golden blood of old Valyria, the blood of the dragon. Dragons did not mate with the beasts of the field, and Targaryens did not mingle their blood with that of lesser men. Yet now, Viserys schemed to sell her to a stranger, a barbarian. When she was clean, the slaves helped her from the water and toweled her dry. The girl brushed her hair until it shone like molten silver, while the old woman anointed her with a spiced flower perfume of the Dothraki plains. A dab on each wrist, behind her ears, on the tips of her breasts, and one last cool touch on her lips, down there between her legs. They dressed her in the wisp-thin undergarments that Magister Illyrio had sent up, and then the gown itself, a deep plum silk, chosen to bring out the violet in her eyes. The girl slid the gilded sandals onto her feet, while the old woman fixed the tiara in her hair and slid golden bracelets crusted with amethysts around her wrists. Last of all came the collar, a heavy gold torque emblazoned with ancient Valyrian glyphs. "Now you look all a princess," the girl said breathlessly when they were done, stepping back to admire her work. Dany glanced at her image in the silvered looking-glass that Illyrio had so thoughtfully provided. A princess, she thought, but then she remembered what the girl had said. How Khal Drogo was so rich even his slaves wore golden collars. She felt a sudden chill, and gooseflesh pimpled her bare arms, a cold premonition of the gilded cage awaiting her. Her brother was waiting in the cool of the entry hall, seated on the edge of the mosaic-tiled pool, his hand trailing idly in the water. He rose when she appeared and looked her over critically, his lilac eyes assessing every detail. "Stand there," he told her. "Turn around. Yes, good. You look regal, Princess Daenerys," Magister Illyrio said, stepping through an archway, his voice a buttery rumble. He moved with surprising delicacy for such a massive man. Beneath loose garments of flame-colored silk, rows of fat jiggled like water as he walked. Gemstones glittered on every finger, and his man had oiled his forked yellow beard until it shone like real gold. "May the Lord of Light shower you with blessings on this most fortunate day, Princess Daenerys," the Magister said, taking her hand with an unexpected gentleness. He bowed his head, showing a thin glimpse of crooked yellow teeth through the gold of his beard. "She is a vision, Your Grace." "A vision," he told her brother, his gaze lingering on Dany. Drogo will be enraptured. She's still skinny, Viserys countered, a note of doubt in his voice. His hair, the same striking silver blonde as hers, had been pulled back tightly behind his head and fastened with a dragonbone brooch. It was a severe look that emphasized the hard, gaunt lines of his face. He rested his hand on the hilt of the ornate sword Illyrio had lent him. Are you sure that Khal Drogo likes his women this young? She has had her blood. She is old enough for the call, Illyrio told him, not for the first time. Look at her. The silver gold hair, those purple eyes. She is the blood of old Valyria, no doubt, no doubt. And highborn, daughter of the old king, sister to the new. She cannot fail to entrance her Drogo. When he released her hand, Daenerys found herself trembling, a barely suppressed shiver running through her. I suppose, her brother said doubtfully, his lip curling. The savages have queer tastes. Boys, horses, sheep. Best not suggest this to Khal Drogo, Illyrio said, a hint of warning in his tone. Anger flashed in Viserys' lilac eyes. Do you take me for a fool? The Magister bowed slightly, his fleshy jowls jiggling. I take you for a king, your grace. Kings lack the caution of common men. My apologies if I have given offense. He turned away and clapped his hands for his bearers, signaling their departure. The streets of Pentos were pitch dark when they set out in Illyrio's elaborately carved palanquin. 2 servants went ahead to light their way, carrying ornate oil lanterns with panes of pale blue glass, while a dozen strong men hoisted the poles to their shoulders. It was warm and close inside behind the heavy curtains. Dany could smell the cloying sweetness of Illyrio's perfumes, an attempt to mask the underlying scent of his pallid flesh. Her brother sprawled out on the pillows beside her, oblivious to his surroundings. His mind was already far away, across the narrow sea. We won't need his Khalasar, Viserys declared, his fingers toying with the hilt of his borrowed blade, though Dany knew he had never used a sword in earnest. 10,000. That will be enough. I could sweep the 7 kingdoms with 10,000 Dothraki screamers. The realm will rise for its rightful king. Tyrell, Redwine, Darry, Greyjoy, they have no more love for the usurper than I do. The Dornishmen burn to avenge Elia and her children, and the small folk will be with us. They cry out for their king. He looked at Illyrio anxiously, his eyes searching for affirmation. Well, they do, don't they? They are your people, and they love you well, Magister Illyrio said amiably, his voice smooth as oil. In holdfasts across the realm, men lift secret toasts to your health, while women sew dragon banners and hide them against the day of your return from across the water. He gave a massive shrug, his fat rippling. Or so my agents tell me. Dany had no agents, no way of knowing what anyone was doing or thinking across the narrow sea, but she mistrusted Illyrio's sweet words, just as she mistrusted everything about Illyrio. Her brother, however, was nodding eagerly. I shall kill the usurper myself, he promised, he who had never killed anyone, as he killed my brother Rhaegar, and Lord Lannister, too, the Kingslayer, for what he did to my father. That would be most fitting, Magister Illyrio said, a barely perceptible hint of a smile playing around his full lips, though her brother did not notice. Nodding, Viserys pushed back a curtain and stared off into the night, and Dany knew he was fighting the battle of the Trident once again, a phantom warrior in a phantom war. The Dothraki manse of Khal Drogo sat beside the waters of the bay, its high brick walls overgrown with pale ivy. It had been given to the Khal by the Magisters of Pentos, Illyrio told them. The free cities are always generous with the horse lords. It is not that we fear these barbarians, Illyrio would explain with a smile, his eyes twinkling. The Lord of Light would hold our city walls against 1,000,000 Dothraki, or so the Red Priests promise. Yet why take chances when their friendship comes so cheap? Their palanquin was stopped at the gate, the curtains pulled roughly back by one of the house guards. He had the copper skin and dark, almond-shaped eyes of a Dothraki, but his face was hairless, and he wore the spiked bronze cap of the Unsullied. He looked them over coldly, his expression devoid of warmth. Magister Illyrio growled something to him in the rough Dothraki tongue. The guardsman replied in the same guttural voice and waved them through the gates. Dany noticed that her brother's hand was clenched tightly around the hilt of his borrowed sword. He looked almost as frightened as she felt. Unsullied. Viserys muttered with disdain as the palanquin lurched forward, up toward the manse. Magister Illyrio's words were honeyed, a soothing balm for Viserys' rattled nerves. Many important men will be at the feast tonight. Such men have enemies. The Khal must protect his guests. Yourself chief among them, your grace. No doubt the usurper would pay well for your head. Oh yes, Viserys said darkly, a flicker of pride mingled with fear. He has tried, Illyrio. I promise that his hired knives follow us everywhere. I'm the last dragon, and he will not sleep easy while I live. The palanquin slowed and stopped. The curtains were thrown back, and a slave offered a hand to help Daenerys out. His collar, she noted, was ordinary bronze, not gold. Her brother followed, one hand still clenched hard around his sword hilt. It took two strong men to get Magister Illyrio back on his feet, his bulk proving a challenge even for them. Inside the manse, the air was heavy with the scent of exotic spices, incense fires, and the sweet notes of lemon and cinnamon. They were escorted across the entry hall, where a vibrant mosaic of colored glass depicted the doom of Valyria, a stark and beautiful tragedy. Oil burned in black iron lanterns all along the walls, casting dancing shadows. Beneath an arch of twining stone leaves, a eunuch sang their coming, his voice high and sweet. Viserys of the House Targaryen, the third of his name, he called out, his voice echoing. King of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. His sister, Daenerys Stormborn, Princess of Dragonstone. And their honorable host, Illyrio Mopatus, Magister of the Free City of Pentos. They stepped past the eunuch into a pillared courtyard, overgrown with pale ivy that shimmered in the moonlight. The soft light painted the leaves in shades of bone and silver as the guests drifted among them. Many were Dothraki horse lords, big men with red-brown skin, their drooping mustachios bound in metal rings, their black hair oiled and braided and hung with tiny bells that chimed softly with their every movement. Yet among them moved bravos and merchants from Pentos and Myr and Tyrosh, a red priest even fatter than Illyrio himself, hairy men from the port of Ibn, and sleek, dark-skinned lords from the Summer Isles, their skin as black as polished ebony. Daenerys looked at them all in wonder and realized, with a sudden start of fear, that she was the only woman there. Illyrio whispered to them, his voice a low hum. Those three by the pillars are Drogo's blood riders. There, Khal Mora with his son, Rhaegar. The man with the green beard is brother to the Archon of Tyrosh, and the man behind him is Ser Jorah Mormont. The last name caught Daenerys' attention. A knight, no less. Illyrio smiled through his beard, a knowing glint in his eye. Anointed with the 7 oils by the High Septon himself. A knight of Westeros, in exile. What is he doing here? She blurted, her surprise overcoming her fear. The usurper wanted his head. Some trifling affront, Illyrio told them, waving a dismissive hand. He sold some poachers to a Tyroshi slaver instead of giving them to the Night's Watch. An absurd law, I say. A man should be able to do as he likes with his own cattle. I shall wish to speak with Ser Jorah before the night is done, her brother said, his interest piqued. Dany found herself looking at the knight curiously. He was an older man, past 40 and balding, but still strong and fit. Instead of silks and fine cottons, he wore wool and leather. His tunic was a dark green, embroidered with the likeness of a black bear standing on 2 legs. She was still looking at this strange man from the homeland she had never known when Magister Illyrio placed a moist, heavy hand on her bare shoulder. Over there, sweet princess, he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. There is the Khal himself. Dany wanted to run and hide, to disappear into the shadows, but her brother was looking at her, his eyes stern, and if she displeased him now, she knew she would wake the dragon. Anxiously, she turned and looked at the man Viserys hoped would ask to wed her before the night was done. The slave girl had not been far wrong, she thought with a surge of terror. Khal Drogo was a head taller than the tallest man in the room, a veritable giant, yet somehow light on his feet, as graceful as a panther in Illyrio's menagerie. He was younger than she'd thought, no more than 30. His skin was the color of polished copper, his thick mustaches bound with intricate rings of gold and bronze. I must go and make my submissions, Magister Illyrio said, releasing her shoulder, and moving to leave them. "Wait here. I shall bring him to you." Her brother took her by the arm, his fingers squeezing so hard that they hurt, a subtle reminder of her place. As Illyrio waddled off toward the call, Viserys leaned closer, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you see his braid, sweet sister?" Drogo's braid was black as midnight and heavy with scented oil, hung with tiny bells that rang softly as he moved. It swung well past his belt, even below his buttocks, the end of it brushing against the back of his thighs. "You see how long it is," Viserys said, his voice imbued with a strange mix of awe and possessiveness. "When Dothraki are defeated in combat, they cut off their braids in disgrace so the world will know their shame. Khal Drogo has never lost a fight. He is Aegon the Dragon Lord come again, and you will be his queen." Dany watched Khal Drogo, her gaze snagging on the harsh lines of his face, a visage carved from granite and indifference. His eyes, she thought, were like polished onyx, as cold and dark as the deepest pits of night. Viserys, her brother, sometimes hurt her, his temper flaring when she woke the dragon, as he called it, but his blows were familiar, a known cruelty. This man, however, filled her with a profound, nameless dread that made her blood run cold. "I don't want to be his queen," she heard herself whisper, the words barely a breath, fragile and thin as spun glass. "Please, please, Viserys, I don't want to. I want to go home." "Home?" Viserys' voice remained deceptively low, but the latent fury simmering beneath it was unmistakable, a dark current threatening to pull her under. He seized her arm, dragging her into the shadows cast by the palanquin, away from prying eyes, his fingers digging into her tender skin. "How are we to go home, sweet sister? They took our home from us." He repeated the question, his grip tightening, the unspoken answer hanging heavy in the stifling air. For him, home was the Red Keep in King's Landing, the ancient fortress of Dragonstone, the sprawling dominion of Westeros they believed was their birthright. For Dany, home was merely their rented rooms in Master Illyrio's sprawling estate, a temporary refuge, certainly no true home, but all they possessed. Her brother, however, was deaf to such mundane yearnings. There was no home for him in those gilded cages. Even the big house with the red door, where they had found fleeting comfort, had never been enough. His fingers dug harder into her arm, a silent demand for an answer she did not possess. "I don't know," she finally choked out, her voice fractured, the tears welling, blurring the edges of her vision. "I do," he declared sharply, his voice cutting through her despair. "We go home with an army, sweet sister. With Khal Drogo's army. That is how we go home. And if you must wed him, and pleasure him for that, you will." A chilling, almost predatory smile stretched his lips. "I'll let his whole Khalasar use you if need be, sweet sister. All 40,000 men and their horses, too. If that was what it took to get my army, be grateful it's only Drogo. In time, you may even learn to tolerate him. Now dry your eyes. Illyrio is bringing him over, and he will not see you crying." Dany turned, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, and saw it was true. Master Illyrio, a picture of obsequious smiles and deep bows, was indeed escorting Khal Drogo towards them. She hastily brushed away a stray tear with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "Smile?" Viserys hissed nervously, his hand unconsciously dropping to the hilt of his sword, a futile gesture of self-reassurance. "And stand up straight. Let him see that you have breasts. Gods, no, you have little enough as it is." With a profound effort, Daenerys forced a trembling smile and straightened her slender frame. Far to the north, in the ancient stronghold of Winterfell, Eddard Stark watched as the king's procession poured through the castle gates, a glittering river of gold and silver and polished steel. 300 strong they came, a proud retinue of bannermen and knights, of sworn swords and free riders, their passage shaking the very earth. Above their heads, a dozen golden banners snapped and whipped furiously in the biting northern wind, each emblazoned with the crowned stag of House Baratheon, its antlers seeming to paw at the gray sky. Ned knew many of these riders, their faces etched into his memory from battles long past and feasts half forgotten. There rode Ser Jaime Lannister, his hair a blinding cascade of beaten gold, radiating an almost insolent beauty even from a distance. Beside him, grim and terrifying, was Sandor Clegane, his face a grotesque mask of burned scars. The tall, fair-haired boy accompanying them could only be Prince Joffrey, radiating a callow arrogance even at his young age. And trailing behind them, a sardonic smirk already forming on his lips, the stunted figure of the imp, Tyrion Lannister. Yet the massive man who led the column, flanked by two solemn knights in the snow-white cloaks of the Kingsguard, seemed almost a stranger to Ned. 15 years of kingship had taken their toll. Then, with a familiar, booming roar that echoed off the castle walls, the figure vaulted off the back of his warhorse. It was Robert, undeniably, as he crushed Ned in a bone-crunching embrace that threatened to squeeze the very breath from his lungs. "Ned, but it's good to see that frozen face of yours," the king bellowed, pulling back to survey him from head to toe, then laughing heartily. "Huh, you've not changed at all." Would that Ned had been able to say the same. It had been 15 years since they had ridden forth together, two young lords eager to win a throne. The Lord of Storm's End, King Robert Baratheon, had once been clean-shaven, his eyes clear and vibrant, his body muscled like a maiden's most fervent fantasy. 6.5 feet tall, he had towered over lesser men, a veritable giant. When he donned his armor and the great antlered helmet of his house, he became an unstoppable force. He possessed a giant's strength too, his weapon of choice a spiked iron warhammer that Ned himself could scarcely lift. In those glorious days, the raw scent of leather and blood had clung to him like perfume, a natural extension of his warrior's spirit. Now, it was actual perfume, cloying and heavy, that clung to him, masking the sweat beneath, and he had a girth that strained the seams of his clothes, a corpulence that matched his impressive height. Ned had last seen the king 9 years before, during Balon Greyjoy's rebellion, when the stag and the direwolf had reunited to put an end to the pretensions of the self-proclaimed king of the Iron Islands. Since that night they had stood side by side in Greyjoy's fallen stronghold, where Robert had accepted the rebel lord's surrender and Ned had taken his son Theon as hostage and ward. The king had gained at least 8 stone. A beard, as coarse and black as iron wire, now covered his jaw, an attempt to conceal his double chin and the sag of his royal jowls. But nothing could hide the mountainous curve of his stomach, nor the dark circles that bruised the skin under his weary eyes. He rarely ventured beyond the heavy oaken doors of his private chambers, the once familiar route to the throne room now an arduous journey, each step a testament to his burgeoning mass. The very air around him seemed to grow thick with the scent of stale wine and forgotten ambition, clinging to the velvet drapes and the king's voluminous robes. His court, once vibrant with the clamor of strategists and petitioners, now operated in hushed whispers, the courtiers exchanging furtive glances, their concern for the realm mirrored in the king's failing health. They spoke of a king lost to his own burdens, a formidable ruler reduced to a shadow, his reign now a protracted, somber twilight. But more than just the physical toll, it was the crushing weight of his responsibilities, combined with an insidious melancholia, that truly imprisoned him. The king's weariness was not merely a physical exhaustion. It was a profound, soul-deep lethargy that clouded his thoughts, dimming the last embers of his royal resolve as he sat often by the cold hearth, staring blankly, a mountain of flesh consumed by the silent, relentless erosion of his own spirit.